And we're back. Greetings, everyone. This is Lucian Vâlsan, broadcasting from Cluj-Napoca, Transylvania. As always, alongside with me is Herr Jon Gunnarsson, broadcasting from Deutschland, and our producer, James Huff, sitting in the background, making sure everything works just fine, broadcasting from the US. Greetings, Mr. Gunnarsson.
Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine right now, but 2 minutes ago I wasn't doing fine at all because I had to perform an emergency boot because thanks to Microsoft's fabulous efficiency, everything suddenly crashed. And yeah, and now I can no longer use my microphone on Linux because Potato or something, they decided to drop support, whatever. So yeah, 2 minutes ago I wasn't doing fine at all.
But we just managed it just in time.
Yep.
And it's also a good thing because we have a lot of news to get to. I think we can't even talk about the weather.
Yeah, well, the weather has been just fine. Seriously, it has been just absolutely fine for the last few days. A lot warmer than I expected. I guess global warming is affecting us or something.
Yeah, I guess it's not really very warm here. It's sort of been cold the last couple of days. Sort of suddenly it became really cold. But let's get to the news.
Yep.
And the first piece of news is from Euronews. French scientists reveal details of breakthrough in infertility treatment. French researchers have revealed details of what they're claiming is a breakthrough in infertility treatment. The scientists in Lyon have created in vitro sperm, human sperm outside the human body. So far it has been developed using a bioreactor and immature cells, such as those found in prepubescent boys. The research has been carried out by a French startup company, Callistem, working with government laboratory CNRS. Quote, "We first tried it using animals, first a familiar animal, the rat, I guess they mean rat, and obtained sperm," explained Marie-Hélène Perrat, CNRS researcher and the co-founder of Callistem. Later we were able to do it using other species, monkeys, than humans. The main challenge has been reproducing in the lab a human process which usually lasts 72 days. It is hoped the development could eventually help thousands of infertile men. Cancer sufferers could also benefit in the future, according to the researchers. Quote, "For young people who have cancer, we will be able to keep their fertility, because until now, when a young boy has cancer, if he's had chemotherapy, it will damage the production of sperm and he will be sterile," said Perrat. More details have been revealed about the process after a patent was secured. There is still a long way to go before the findings are translated into medical use. The technology must now be clinically tested. Very interesting.
Good news.
Yeah, it's one of these pieces of good news that the media should really report on more often, because there's a lot of good news going on everywhere.
Yeah, it's that daily reminder that the world is getting better.
Yeah,
at least in some regards.
Yeah, I mean, this is not like it's not an earth-shattering development, but it's certainly a good thing that people will be able to have children even after they have cancer, and it's also has a lot of other sort of areas of application where creating a sperm in vitro, that's a really powerful technology that can be used for all sorts of things.
Yes, although as far as I understand, it still requires a human. It's not entirely artificial, but
yeah, okay, but it basically means that if this thing can be properly developed, and then basically infertility in men is going to be a thing of the past.
Yeah, pretty much. Which is a good thing, because if we are to follow some other developments in some countries of Europe, I think Denmark is the leading at this point. Infertility in men is becoming quite an issue.
Yep.
Okay. I guess we go with the next one. Oh, the next one is interesting, and it comes even with a follow-up that emerged a few hours ago. Coming from The Independent, Warwick University student George Lawlor divides opinion after opposing union sex consent lessons. A student at the University of Warwick has divided opinion online after speaking out against being invited to sex consent training lessons, a move he says was the biggest insult I've received in a good few years. Writing in online student publication The Tab, politics and sociology student George Lawlor described how he was excited to receive an invite to what he thought was a social event, but says his crushing disappointment quickly melted away to be overcome by anger when he realized what he was being invited to. Having acknowledged how people should only interact with mutual agreement, he said he still found the invitation to be loathsome, adding, quote, "It implies I have an insufficient understanding of what does and does not constitute consent, and that's incredibly hurtful. I can't stress that enough." The communications secretary for Warwick's Conservative Association continued how he felt he was taking the wrong side by speaking out and continued, quote, "But someone has to say it. I don't have to be taught not to be a rapist. That much comes naturally to me, as I'm sure it does to the overwhelming majority of people you and I know. Brand me a bigot, a misogynist, a rape apologist, I don't care. I stand by that." However, the student's piece didn't go down well with a lot of people who took to Twitter to blast him for his outlook, with one male user writing, quote, "George Laurel, you're a fucking idiot and your article is offensive to women and an embarrassment to men." And the tweets didn't stop there. However, one user did see where Laurel was coming from. Another user on Reddit wrote, quote, "This kid is so right on. The people holding these sessions are just trying to make themselves feel good while making no real difference in their echo chamber. It's about time university students like him started speaking up. Hope more are inspired to follow his example." Shortly after Lawlor's article surfaced, Warwick's women's officer and one of the organizers of the I Heart Consent workshops, Josie Thrope, or Thrope, whatever, also took to the tab to write how she was angry at reading Lawlor's piece, adding how she was not sorry her workshop made him feel uncomfortable. She explained, quote, "The first time I was confronted with the statistic that 80% of rape survivors know their attacker, I felt the same," end of quote. Now, since this article was published on The Independent, another student took it to the press to announce his retirement from such events, took it to the Breitbart London, and he published an article, "I'm a student and I too declined to attend classes, consent classes. Mr. Jack something." Yeah, if this browser would work faster, that would be fabulous. But it's not.
Jack Hatfield.
Yeah. And no, what I wanted to read a portion of his article. Yeah, this one. This individual who goes by @ToryBastard_ on Twitter. He says, "Anyway, I'm not going. I think we all know what goes down at these things anyway, don't we? The male students will be bombarded with stats about 1 in 4 women, bogus and offensive conspiracy theories about toxic masculinity, and suggestions that, yes, all men are potential rapists. Well, I'm sorry, but in case you didn't know, pre-crime is sci-fi. Having a penis does not make me a rapist. In fact, the highest volume of domestic violence and sexual abuse is found in lesbian couples. You know, the ones that don't actually involve men." I really like this portion. Overall, I think it's fabulous news. I mean, I've been shouting in this show for what, a year now? Just keep on saying, why don't students just stand up to this bigotry and just start saying, no, fuck you all?
Yeah, I guess it's because they're afraid. Because when you stand up to these sort of consent classes, that sort of means that you're sort of on the side of the rapists and therefore automatically evil. It's a sort of thing where people who don't have time to think about this for more than 30 seconds, they will just see, one person is, one side is against rape and the other side, well, that must be pro-rape. And that's where sort of the naive thinking stops usually. And and I mean these consent classes, I think they do have good intentions. It's just that but the whole thing, I don't think that the whole thing works, and it's just really condescending and offensive to students who have to go through this. Not to mention being a waste of time.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, but then again, we all know that good intentions don't guarantee good results. But then again, I mean, if you are to have, I mean, I've seen some comments from leftists who disagree with this. They were saying that, well, maybe consent classes should exist, but at university level, I mean, wouldn't they be more appropriate? I don't know, when the kids are 15 or something. That's a fair point. I mean, you certainly have a lot more time to waste during high school than during university. Obviously, my position is that such classes should not exist at all because it's retarded. But yeah, I mean, I can understand why the peer pressure may stop individuals um, to stand up to this nonsense. On the other hand, I like this kid's approach. I mean, he said, yeah, well, you're gonna call me a misogynist and a rape apologist. I don't care. I stand by what I've said. Fuck you. That's a very healthy attitude.
Yeah, and it's exactly the right attitude to take.
Yes.
And I do think that there is going to be, or there is a lot of support for people standing up to that. Once someone takes a stand and takes that risk of being the first one to stand up.
Hmm.
Because I don't think these sort of policies are popular at all. Most people
No.
just think that's just crazy, but they just go along because they don't want to stir the boat, and they don't want to appear as if they're somehow in favor of rape or
Hmm.
being a rape apologist or whatever they want to call it.
Hmm.
Um, but once someone has actually stood up to that, a lot of people are going to support this sort of stand.
Yeah, because they're essentially going to be the one who says, look, the emperor is really naked. It
Yep.
doesn't have nice clothes. The emperor really is naked. And then suddenly the whole veneer of pretense starts to fade out. And now it's the second student who didn't publish in the tab, he published in Breitbart. That means the entire planet is going to see it because, I don't know, their online publication, if it hadn't been for Independent to cover this, I would have never heard about that publication. So yeah, but once it's in Breitbart London, there's been a lot more people who are gonna start looking into this, uh, and that's a good thing. And I can't stop myself from wondering if this isn't the effect of a numerous non-feminists within the UK who have kept on agitating on these topics, notwithstanding Mr. Mike Buchanan, who recently had a lecture in another university.
Yeah, and the thing is that there's lots of people who don't agree with this sort of feminist claptrap, but they're afraid to speak up. But once they see that lots of other people also have hold these beliefs, then it becomes safe to speak up. Then it sort of becomes common knowledge that lots of people
Everyone
are
knows
against
that
this. But
everyone knows that
yeah,
everyone knows
exactly.
that feminism is bullshit. Yeah.
But
No,
if
go ahead.
you can have a situation where most people believe that feminism is bullshit, but they're afraid to speak up because they don't know that other people also know that feminism
Hmm.
is bullshit.
Yeah, and no, that's what I'm wondering. How much of this is the effect of uh, relentless activism by people like Mike Buchanan and even earlier on Erin Pitti and so on? Because Mike had just called for this like 3 weeks ago in another British university, in which he essentially said, "Stop being so goddamn polite. No, stand up and say, no, fuck you all. You're wrong. I'm right. Get out. Get lost."
Yeah, it's very difficult to tell how much this sort of activism has actually contributed there. It's sort of it's like you're just sort of tossing things out there, and some of them will stick,
Mhm.
possibly. You know um, whether they do or not, and
Mhm.
it's difficult to sort of show that this piece of activism caused this sort of reaction that's always sort of uncertain.
Yeah, unless you have direct confirmations. I mean, something like, I don't know, someone saying, "Look, I've heard that guy saying that, and I think he's correct. Therefore, I'm going to do this." Otherwise, it's very difficult to know which is which and what exactly caused it. But anyway, it's progress nonetheless, and it's progress for real, not progress. So yeah,
Let's get to some other piece of
yep.
progress. Let's go to the silly
Oh,
place.
yeah. Well, meanwhile, in Sweden, coming from the Guardian. Singing tampons follow dancing genitals on Swedish kids' TV. No, it's not a joke. The period song explaining menstruation will air on the same children's public service channel that broadcast cartoon genitals earlier this year. A Swedish children's TV show that aired a video earlier this year featuring animating dancing genitals and launched a new clip of singing tampons to each youngsters about menstruation. The period song will air on Friday on the Barnkanalen, children's channel, part of the public service broadcaster SVT. The broadcaster said it hoped the video would help to destigmatize the subject and explain menstruation to children. One of the channel's young hosts, Alex Hermansson, sings with teenagers and pulls on the tampon strings to make them dance like marionettes before submerging them in a glass of red-colored water. Hermansson told the daily newspaper Expressen that menstruation is a sign that as of now the body can create a life. Another clip produced and aired by SVT in January featured the animated male and female genitals called Snoppen och Snippan in Swedish and translated into English as Willy and Twinkle, and it has been viewed on YouTube more than 6.4 million times. That clip was intended as an educational tool and was made after the word snippan was created by a group of women who were dismayed by the lack of an acceptable slang term for vagina. The clip divided opinion due to the realistic representation of sexual organs. Seriously, Sweden, what the fuck?
Yeah, I don't know.
Now, I'm sorry, but I really do think it is completely inappropriate to use taxpayers' money to make clips with dancing dicks and show them to 5-year-olds. I'm sorry, I really think it's inappropriate. You can call me a conservative, right-wing bigot, whatever, I don't care. I think it is inappropriate.
Yeah, I don't know exactly at what sort of age group this was aimed, but I mean, the sort of sex education is important, but you don't need it for small children. I mean, why?
Barnkanalen is channels pretty much like Fox Kids or Jetix. The demographic is essentially 3 to 10-year-old.
Okay.
Of course, the Guardian won't say that. They're gonna keep on. Oh, it's teenagers. No, teenagers don't watch Barnkanalen. Were you still watching cartoons at the age of 16? I don't think so.
Yeah, but they just said that there were teenagers in that video singing, not that teenagers were watching that.
Yeah. But then again, that is implied. And an editor responds in the comments, yeah, but it's mostly for teenagers. No, it's not. Barnkanalen is for under 10-year-olds, essentially. And again, I don't think it's appropriate. I think it's messed up.
Yeah, like, why do you have to teach this to young children? I mean, it's completely it's completely sufficient to learn that once you're, I don't know, 11, 12, 13, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Also, why is this the business of the state TV? Shouldn't it be the business of the, I don't know, parents? There is such thing called parents. My generation learned about these things from parents.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the thing is that there are a lot of say conservative parents who don't want their children to watch that sort of thing, and do you just say, fuck you? If how's that supposed to work? How about showing, I don't know, some sort of respect or tolerance to people with other viewpoints? But no.
I don't think a parent needs to be conservative to disagree with his child, his 5-year-old, watching dancing dicks on TV. I don't think one needs to be a conservative. I can find at least 1 million leftists who would share my opinion that it is inappropriate.
Yeah, it depends on the age. I wouldn't say that it's inappropriate for, say, a 10-year-old child, but 5-year-olds.
I mean, seriously, and then again, what I find fundamentally immoral is this portion using taxpayers' money for all this. But then again, I'm the radical guy who thinks that there's such thing as taxpayers' money being used to have a TV station is inherently immoral. So then again, I don't think that I'm a bit outside of the Overton window on that one. But oh Jesus Christ! But then again, it comes from the country that asks kids at 13 to write their suicide notes. So I guess why the hell are we surprised that they're putting dancing dicks to 5-year-olds? It's yeah. Sweden, yes. Oh, and by the way, I haven't included in the news. I'll make a video about this next week. Now, there's another scandal because a 13-year-old or 14-year-old girl is suing um, a train station because the security there said, "Ma'am, that is men's bathroom. Please go back to women's bathroom." And said, "Yeah, but it's a queue in there." "Well, tough luck. You're gonna wait in queue." And then she got mad because, "How do you know that I'm a girl? Just because I have long hair, tits, and a feminine body? You're misgendering me." And now they're suing.
Yeah, I can smell your lack of a Y chromosome.
Yep, 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 yep. Okay, let's go to the next one.
Okay, the next one is a column from Spiegel Online from Jan Fleischer, who is sort of the token conservative of Spiegel. And it's called "How Naive Do We Want to Be?" Since the beginning of September, there's a photo on Katrin Göring-Eckart's Facebook page, and she's from the Green Party. She's I guess, the chairwoman of the faction in the Bundestag. So there's a photo on Katrin Göring-Eckart's Facebook page showing an approximately 5-year-old girl holding her head out holding her head out of a train compartment and looking at the viewer with big eyes. Quote, hashtag refugees on their way from Gevgelija, whatever that's pronounced, to the Serbian border. The hover text reads. The photo immediately catches one's eye. Together with the greeting, "Refugees Welcome," it is the title page of the politician's Facebook wall. It's a lovely picture. Anyone who doesn't have a heart of stone would like to take the child by the hand and lead her to a safe place. The Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, too, presented a refugee picture last week. This photo had been taken in Berlin and was the paper's cover picture that day. It showed new arrivals waiting to be registered as asylum seekers. A colleague with whom I talked on the phone asked me whether I had noticed that it was different from many refugee photos. He was right. The photo showed neither women nor children. It was just men passing time, leaning against a white barrier. It matters which pictures one is thinking of when talking about refugees. If, like Katrin Göring-Eckart, you primarily see children in need of help, you'll think anyone who's openly talking about the limit to how many people we can accept is a monster. But as far as the reality of migration is concerned, the facts unfortunately speak against the faction chairwoman of the Greens and for the FAZ. About 70% of the people coming to us are young men traveling alone. So far, the crisis has happened outside of the city centers, where the opinion molders in the refugee debate typically live. Someone strolling through the shopping districts of Hamburg or Munich would never suppose that there are many municipalities where no one knows how to cope with the situation. But this state of peaceful coexistence could change rapidly. The sociologist Amin Nasehi, who by the way is a proponent of more immigration, talks of a quote-unquote masculinization of public spaces, which we should be prepared for. We'll have to see how Germany's enlightened elite will react when this new group of loiterers reaches the inner cities. For the hashtag Aufschrei world, which already sees an overly aggressive look at someone's behind or breasts as a sexual assault, the word masculinization can't be a good sign. Maybe the attitude toward the refugee in the green quarters will be markedly cooler once they realize that he does not understand the etiquette surrounding the relation between the sexes. One of the paradoxes of migration is that both to the left and to the right of the center, the stranger is only ever wanted if his strangeness isn't all too noticeable. And I've cut the second half of the article because it's really long.
Yeah, I love that portion. To the sector that sees anything as even a look as a sexual assault, the word masculinization should be. That's a very good bitch slap right there. Yeah, and he has a point. Both the left and the right seem to be quite in ignorance of the fact that yes, most of these invaders are men, and that comes with some challenges, and it also comes with some opportunities. You and I talked about this, I think, last show. You said that yeah, well, they are essentially the most productive individuals that could come, but on the other hand, they pose obviously the risk of committing more crime. So there's a trade-off.
Yeah, and it's what I find interesting about this article is that it just sort of automatically assumes that mostly men coming, that's a bad thing, just because it's masculinization and
Hmm.
therefore just somehow inherently evil.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, why is it a problem if most of the people coming are male? I mean, if presumably you could make sort of the argument that there's going to come lots of men and then there's so many men in Germany or something, but at present something like 51% of the population is female, and if another say a million refugees come and there's 70% men among these, then that means 700,000 men and 300,000
That's
women.
0.1% tops of the population.
Yeah,
Actually, even less than that.
so that basically means that the difference shifts by 400,000 people. That would still mean that the majority would still be female, and
Mhm.
if even if several million people come, it still will only shift things a little bit. So
Mhm.
this idea that German um, German culture or something is going to be masculinized, that's just completely over the top and
He
complete
said public
exaggeration.
spaces, not culture. Yeah, I don't think that would, the impact on culture would be that big. But yeah, I can understand the concerns. I just think that they're the wrong kind of concerns. The biggest concern is in the rise of crime, and that's it. The this thing that but yeah, there'll be a little bit. I don't know if there's usually 500 men in a public space, and then there'll be 503. I don't think that counts as something relevant, as a valid concern. And even if there would be the next week will be instead of 500 will be 600, I still don't think it's a valid concern. That's
Yeah,
total
and
nonsense.
for that to happen, it would be the tens of millions of people, not quite tens of million, but like
At
many
least
millions.
five
It's
million, yeah, at least
yeah,
5 million to make such a shift. On the other hand, let's not forget that Germany, just like all of Europe, actually, is largely gynocentric, and putting an image of a young girl or a woman makes far more appeal than an image of an impoverished man. It just the way it is.
yeah. I mean, there's obviously this sort of implication that if this girl is um, is in trouble, that's obviously not her fault, and we need to help her and so on. Whereas if it's
Mhm.
a man, maybe it's his own fault. Maybe he should look out for himself and so on. That's
Mhm.
I think it's just a sort of a normal human reaction, and
Yeah, it is normal. That it doesn't, and it served humans quite well in the past, and it doesn't serve us quite well now. But yeah, it is normal, but it's still gynocentric in nature. And obviously, those who favor more immigration, I'm not amongst them, but whatever. Those who favor more immigration will tend to use that, and it's a very efficient tool if you want to forward the argument that, for instance, Germany needs to be more welcoming of even more invaders, yeah, you're going to put images of women and children. That's the way forward to win hearts and minds. From their point of view, it makes perfect sense. And this author asks, how naive can we be? Well, very naive. A lot of people buy the argument exactly on those grounds. Oh yeah, but more compassion, more women and children. They don't even think about any kind of consequences. I'm not saying they should agree with me, but they don't even consider the consequences at all.
yeah, it's it's really very much about the emotional piece. It's
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
really is like that, on both sides of this issue. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
not like everyone is arguing against it. It's just bringing just cold facts and cost benefit analysis and so on. Um, I think that's just sort of a function of this discussion being conducted in this very public manner and with this sort of very ideological issue that sort of uh,
Mm-hmm.
divides German society right now. And it's like it seems like the press is like half the stories in any newspaper or news report or something are about this immigration or this refugee crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and it's also the problem, from what I hear from various sources, that the counter argument is kind of banned, in the sense that the press refuses to cover the counter argument. They just brand Nazis, anyone who disagrees with the received wisdom. And whenever that happens, it eventually will create real Nazis.
Yeah, I mean it's not quite the kind of argument isn't quite banned, but like almost all of the reputable newspapers are on one side of this issue, and only very few are on the other side. So it's not like like the other side is banned, but it's a strong suggestion that on the one side is good and the other side is are these sort of nasty right wing people who maybe they sort of have a point, but in any case they are sort of disreputable and um, not to be trusted. And
Not to be trusted, not to be considered, yes.
yeah, and this is so whole sort of discussion just pisses me off because I just disagree strongly with both sides of because like both sides make all these horrible arguments and I'm just really fed up with this topic.
Yeah, and I was reading. The reason why I have this feeling is not just because I compare it with France, but I was reading just yesterday, I think, an article in English by Der Spiegel when they were documenting the resurface of Pegida, and the tone of the article was like, "What are these people thinking? Why don't they get back in line with the received wisdom?" That was the tone of the article, and that thing doesn't help. It obviously doesn't help when the opposition comes in and say, "Oh yeah, they're gonna come and rape our women." Well, yeah and no, most likely no. uh, so yeah, I can understand why you're fed up, because you obviously have to hear it a lot more often. At least I can choose when to turn off the noise.
Well, I guess the Pegida people they are really they are not really making sort of serious criticisms. They're mostly just sort of angry people and in mobs um, and there are actually quite a few genuine sort of neo-Nazis among these people and in their protests and so on. So
Yeah, well, just
I
like there
I,
are
I don't really
genuine
have any problem with
Leninists
them.
among SPD.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with them writing very negative articles about Pegida.
Mhm, I see. Yeah, but what I'm trying to say, and I said about the comparison with France, Marine Le Pen is her party is due to win this December regional election. Sorry, uh, in part because any time she speaks, whether she's correct or not, she's prosecuted for hate speech. That kind of attitude tends to foster growth for genuine totalitarians. And mind you, Front National is a genuinely totalitarian political party. This kind of thing is no joke. I mean, suppressing freedom of speech tends to bring these kinds of consequences.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem when you have um, when you have people making sort of moderate, reasonable right-wing arguments, and then they're just shouted down. Then um, people with right-wing sentiments are just going to say, "Well, fuck it," and then if people won't listen to my reasonable arguments, I'm just going to support these extremist arguments instead.
Hmm. 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 Yep. Sticking on the topic of immigration crisis in Europe, coming from Breitbart London, claim No Borders activists gang raped by migrants pressured into silence to not damage the cause. A young female No Borders activist working in a migrant camp on the France-Italy border remained silent about her gang rape by Sudanese migrants for over a month because the others asked me to keep quiet. Colleagues are alleged to have said that reporting the crime would set back their struggle for a borderless world. The No Borders activist had dedicated a month of her life to helping migrants. Her group was stationed between Italy and France in Ponte San Ludovico in Ventimiglia when the atrocity occurred, according to reports from local papers La Stampa and Il Secolo Novice, and now reported in the major Italian national Corriere della Sera. One Saturday night, as loud music played at a nearby party, the woman was reportedly trapped in a shower block and set up near the camp in a pine forest known as Red Leap. A gang of African migrants allegedly raped her there, and her cries for help are said to have gone unheard because of the music. La Stampa reports that the woman, around 30 years of age, would have reported the horrific crime were if not for her fellow left-wing activists who convinced her that if the truth got out, it could damage their utopian dream of a world without borders. But Corriere della Sera also reports that some of her fellow activists are now accusing the woman of reporting the rape out of spite because her group was withdrawn from the camp following a separate controversy. The town of Ventimiglia, where the alleged crime occurred, has been a flashpoint in the ongoing migrant crisis. And then the article goes on even further. Is that a left-wing feminist rape culture there?
Yeah, I guess maybe we're seeing this sort of um, progressive trump card game going on, and apparently
Yep.
right now, migrants trump women.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And well, I have yet to find further reports on this event, so I don't know. Maybe it will eventually be proven to be entirely made up, or maybe not. I don't know. But even if it's made up, there have been in the past cases where this definitely has happened. This progressive trump card game, notwithstanding Rotherham in the UK, where the authorities refused to act in an obvious case of migrant gangs raping teenage girls because for the fear of being called racist and affecting the cause.
Yeah, definitely this can happen. Whether it's happened in this case, I don't know. It's
Yeah, again, I don't know either. It could be entirely bollocks. But given that a few other cases did occur, and we know they're not bollocks, it seems that this trump card game keeps on reappearing from time to time. And I don't know, maybe I'm biased, but I think it is entirely toxic.
yeah, definitely, and I can definitely well imagine this happening, but at some time we also have to be careful that that this is Breitbart, and they are of course also biased, and this sort of
Yeah, but they
thing
cite
fits
Corriere
in
della
right.
Sera, which is a migrant favoring newspaper. So
Okay,
yeah, there you go.
okay,
And again, I mean, this was reported from everything from the left to the right, not in
okay.
English, mind you. The Guardian refused to write about this. Quelle surprise! But no, I mean, the story itself is reported regardless of partisanship, at least in Italian and French, and whether it's true or not, I don't know. But this progressive trump card game, as you call it, just keeps on resurfacing. And again, the Rotherham case was particularly extraordinary because it was big, but it happens at smaller scales in other places as well. I mean, it was recently the British Socialist Society or something like that, an organization affiliated with the Labour Party, where also four women alleged to have been raped. One of them actually proved her case in court, but they were prevented at first from reporting it because one of the perpetrators was of a migrant background, and it would and of course the official motivation was that we don't trust the bourgeois capitalist system to deliver justice, which is particularly insane. Why? What I'm trying to understand here is the thought process of progressives. Why do they think that such thing is okay? Because it's obvious that a significant portion of them do believe so when push comes to shove.
Yeah, because I mean it would reinforce stereotypes, and that would obviously be bad. Never mind the fact that most stereotypes
Are
become
there for a
stereotypes
reason?
because they are sort of maybe somewhat exaggerated empirical generalizations, but they have a true core, and that's why you often um, that's why you more often find things in reality that conform to stereotypes
Mhm.
than that challenge stereotypes.
Mhm. Yeah, the fight, the progressive fight against the existence of stereotypes is another thing that I don't understand. I mean, like, look, the stereotypes are there for a reason. Yeah, some of them are messed up, but they don't appear out of nowhere or out of oppression.
Yeah, at least usually not.
At least usually not. Yeah. Anyway, let's go to the next one. Oh, this one is very long. Go ahead.
And this one's actually a case where stereotypes are being challenged.
Yep.
It's the Walthamstow riots, the dark truth about female street violence, on the telegraph.co.uk. Last night, 200 teenagers, mainly young women, were involved in a mass fight in the London borough of Walthamstow. Radhika Sangani reports on the growing problem of street violence among girls. Walthamstow was taken over by around 200 young people fighting on the streets last night. Smartphone footage posted to Twitter shows teenage girls pulling one another's hair, police breaking up brawls, and people hitting each other with baseball bats. The incident quickly earned its own hashtag, Walthamstow and Walthamstow riots, which started trending on Twitter. Police were forced to close off the street outside Walthamstow Central Tube Station in London, and though no one was seriously injured, 3 people were arrested. When the 200-strong group of 16 to 20-year-olds eventually dispersed around 9 p.m., locals said the streets were left littered with hair extensions, nose rings, and push-up bras. Reports on social media seem to suggest that the fight was dominated by girls in their late teens and was originally started by 2 girls from rival colleges, Sir George Monod College and Leighton's Sixth Form College. On Instagram, one girl wrote, "Started off with 2 girls from different colleges having a fight over a guy they were both dating. Who is this guy?" Colin James, founder of local charity Gangs Unite that tackles gang culture in Waltham Forest, said his contacts have told him the same story. Quote, "It was going around the colleges that there was going to be a fight. It just meant to be the 2 girls who were supposed to fight, but the groups of friends got involved. They all just jumped in and went for it. That's the culture these days. Young people don't fight by themselves. Boys would never let one boy fight alone, and girls have copied the same example. They're standing up for their friends." End quote. James says it was unlikely the incident specifically involved gang cultures, as gangs are typically defined as groups with leaders and identifying traits based in specific geographical locations. Instead, this was an example of youth street violence. On social media, teens who posted footage of the fight called it "college wars." James wasn't shocked by the viciousness of the girls fighting. Quote, "Violence against girls isn't that rare. They fight all the time." But he was taken aback by how many young people joined in. He attributes this new development in street violence to a rise in technology. Social media is changing things. It used to be word of mouth, but now when people talk about it on social media, it attracts so many others. Many of the 200 young people involved may have initially gone to watch the 2 girls fight, but once they were there, they decided to join in. Patrick Regan, CEO of charity XLP, which works with young people to prevent antisocial behavior, explains, "There'll be a lot of things bubbling underneath the surface. Something kicks off and it's an excuse to go to war, to react in a really negative way. It's an explosion of anger, and once it happens, they're out of control. It's that pack mentality where everyone joins in and they're all egging each other on." He says this has been becoming more common in the last few years. It feels to me we live in a culture where there's a lot of fear and intimidation. People fly off the handle very quickly, and things seem to escalate quickly now. We saw that with the 2011 London riots, where people had a "we've got nothing to lose" mentality. The problem, according to Reagan, is one of economics. Young people who are drawn to street violence are living in poor housing, struggling with education, and come from deprived backgrounds. They lack positive role models and often feel like they have little hope. That, he suggests, could be what spurs them on to mindless violence. Junior Smart, youth leader of a London-based SOS Gangs project, adds that another factor is many young people dropping out of school. Quote, "We know that serious street violence is underreported, but we don't know to what extent," he says. The situation of street violence is getting worse in terms of the ages people are exposed to it and how it manifests itself through colleges. He explains that if young people drop out of school, become involved in street violence, and then decide to return to take their GCSEs or A-levels, they can then bring that culture into the mainstream education system, something that may have been a factor in the Walthamstow street brawl. Skipping a bit here, but the problem isn't just college culture. As Smart points out, the more worrying factor is that many young people are nonplussed by these incidents of street violence. Quote, "Everyone's shocked by it except for the people who were there and part of it, because for them the kind of stuff happens on a regular basis." This attitude is obvious in social media. Last night, young people who were involved in the Walthamstow fight joked about it openly. There were more emoji and lols littering the posts than words of concern. Quote, "There's increasingly a desensitization of what's seen as acceptable and what's seen as criminal," says Smart, who adds that it's particularly prevalent with girls who become involved in street violence or gang culture. Quote, "Young girls don't realize a guy touching them is sexual assault. They become accustomed to things like lineups where a girl performs a sex act on a group of boys. That's unacceptable, but it's become so normalized, as has the violence. It's a regular part of their lives." The statistics around girls and boys being involved in gangs are not fully known, but it's estimated that for every male gang member, there are 2 or 3 females. It's clear that girls play a large part in street violence, but the reasons for joining can be different. Quote, "I believe girls come in for different reasons," says Smart. "While boys are attracted to winning respect, kudos, or even video games and trainers, he says, girls are brought in by relationships and friends. They're not normally there of their own volition." This emphasis on relationships was reportedly the cause of the Walthamstow fight, as the girls were initially said to be fighting over a boy. But Smart says it would have quickly escalated to a fight about respect, with boys joining in to defend other girls. Quote, "The way these groups work is it's about respect, disrespect, and the consequences of that. As the situation evolves, people feel violated, like people are taking the piss and crossing the line. So more and more join in. The general consensus is that things could have been much worse and the young people involved are lucky not to have been seriously injured." Again, skipping a bit here. His main concern now is that the buzz around the Walthamstow riots could spark copycat incidents or result in an ongoing feud between the colleges and girls involved. Quote, "I want to see if there's going to be a continuation or any backlash from it. I know young people like to mimic other young people. It might happen again in another area because it's put girls back in the spotlight again. Girls from other areas might want to get in on that. Once a fight starts, it doesn't stop, because they don't ever kiss and make up. We'll be on the lookout." Wow, that was long. Let's take a
Yeah,
drink now.
yeah, long, but and filled with problems. I mean, the article is, as you said before you started reading, it is a stereotype challenging one, but on the other hand, it's also a race towards making excuses for violent bitches. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, at every instance, they're trying to explain away the behavior of these girls by external factors. It's all just they're from a poor environment and they're deprived and they don't have a lot of education, and it's these relationships bringing them in and they're not there of their own volition and blah blah blah. Meanwhile, the boys are there. They're there obviously just for them. It's just all about fighting because they like to fight, because they're violent, because they're boys.
Yeah, and this paragraph, they learned the pattern from their boys. Young people don't fight by themselves. Boys would never let one boy fight alone, and girls have copied that same example. So it's the boy's fault for providing an example. Obviously, I mean, it's not like there would be. It's not like such thing as violent girls would exist or something. Um, and it's also this one, yeah, but boys join gangs because of video games, so it's not uh, uh, I mean, again, finding a pattern here with the blaming video games for everything. I mean, is there anything that video games haven't been blamed for lately? I mean, it was mass shooting, it was misogyny, it was patriarchy, now gangs. Uh, Video games seem to be the culprit of anything these days.
Yeah, but it would seem to me that people who play video games are actually a lot less likely to end up in a gang,
Yeah.
but maybe that's just
Yeah,
me.
absolutely, because they're fat as fuck and they stay in front of a computer. They don't have time to run around the streets. Joke aside, yeah, I mean, this tendency to blame anything on video games is just absolutely insane. Also, this one, young girls don't realize that a guy touching them is sexual assault. Well, yes and no, depends. Um, they become
So,
accustomed
so
to
the
things like
last time, so the last time I shook a woman's hand, I was actually sexually assaulting her.
yes,
Good to know.
yes, yes. And also this one, they became accustomed to things like lineups. So essentially, they consensually engage in gang banging, and yet that's unacceptable and violence. Wait, what? I mean, this smart guy isn't really that smart, isn't he?
Yeah, this article is sort of a clusterfuck in terms of the sort of explanations they give here.
Yeah, that's why I kept most of it for the segment, because it's a constant race towards excusing the behaviors of violent, cunty teenage girls, and also a race towards excusing things that don't need to be excused. They just need to be taken as they are. Oh my God, teenage girls enjoy in engage in group sex. Well, so fucking what? None of your business. It's their business. Oh my God, they joined because they played the same video games. Let's presume that's true. So what? Uh, Very little focus on the violence itself. Although I do have to praise the one of the other individuals cited in here. I think this one, James something, who says that, well, violence against. I think he wanted to say amongst girls isn't that rare. They fight all the time. That's true. Uh, when I was a teenager, it was quite common for two girls to start pulling each other's hairs. It wasn't really that rare. Sure, it didn't happen every day, but it wasn't really that rare. It's a lot more common than those who believe that women are wonderful. Think that it happens. It happens a lot more often than that. On the other hand, gang violence with a lot of girls, now that's something that I think it's rather uncommon.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really speak from personal experience here because the school I went to, as far as I know, there was no gang violence either by boys or girls, so I don't know.
No, gang violence, I didn't see that as a teenager either, but violence amongst the two individuals, yes, I have seen that quite a healthy dose of it, I would say. And yes, some of those engaging in violence with another person were girls. Uh, I still remember during an English class, two girls started physically fighting each other during the class, and the teacher was appalled. And had it not been for a stronger colleague of mine, probably the fight would have continued a lot more, and one of them would have definitely ended up being hurt. So yeah, I mean, it's not incredibly common, but it's not that rare. Yeah, I totally agree with this article on that particular aspect.
Yeah, yeah.
And there is another explanation that's correct in there. They lack role models. That's true. That's actually true. But I wonder how and why there is such thing that Erin Pitti describes as male desert zones, entire neighborhoods where there is no adult man. And such things apparently do exist quite a lot in London, as per Erin Pitti. Uh, who removed those fathers in there? I mean, they can't be all deadbeats, can't they? And these
Yeah,
may,
probably not.
yeah, these kids may be the children of those relationships that were destroyed during the early 90s with the help uh, of the state.
Though there are some confounding factors here that you know uh, sort of children from single mother families, they're often also just inferior in terms of their social class, in terms of their also just in terms of their genes. That for example, parents with a low IQ are more likely to divorce or to
Mhm,
get or to not marry at all when they have children.
mhm,
So uh, people from fatherless homes also just get worse genes. They're poorer and so on. That's also um, definitely an important fact. It's not just the absence of fathers here.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, but what I said earlier is based on the fact that the 2011 London riots were absolutely and categorically blamed mostly on fatherlessness because they had discovered that something like 70 or 80% of the youngsters that rioted in 2011 were coming from fatherless homes. And yes, whilst I do agree with what you say, on the other hand, it's interesting that they place a thing on they say, oh, it's a problem of economics. Yet on the other hand, it's a fight between two colleges. Now, in Britain, as opposed to the rest of Europe, going to college isn't exactly cheap. It's not the poorest of the poor who go to college.
Yeah. Also, you should mention that college in Britain is not quite the same as college in the US, where college is just sort of a different term for university.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Think of it, college in Britain is pretty much like community college in uh, uh, in the US, which is essentially something that you do after high school, but it's not exactly university.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, let's go to the next one. Ah, the next one is funny. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, next one is also from me. Okay. From the Telegraph again. Why are feminists so unpleasant to women? If you consider yourself to be a feminist, may I politely suggest you look away now? Otherwise, there's every chance that after reading this, you will not so politely tell me where I can stick my opinion. And judging my past experience, it won't be anywhere pleasant. You see, my name is Angela, and I'm a non-feminist. Part of a growing sector of women who feel that today's militant women's voice does not speak in their name. Yet whenever people like me dare suggest that post-millennial feminism is outdated and irrelevant, the reaction from the sisterhood is decidedly unsisterly. How I still treasure the tweets from author Emma Kennedy, who declared that she'd like to kick me in the shins after I espoused my non-feminist view on Newsnight. Not that she was alone. My inbox and Twitter feed has, on various occasions, spluttered with 50 shades of insults, and worse, from women who don't like my stance. And thereby hangs the irony, especially in the week that the film Suffragette is released. To paraphrase Jane Austen, and more of her later, it's a truth not so universally acknowledged that feminists can be really horrible to other women. Perhaps such bitchiness stems from the fact that feminists have lost their cause, since all the great battles upon which the suffrage movement was founded, such as voting rights, equality of education, have been fought and won. Girls now outperform boys at GCSE and in further education, while around 20% more girls make it to university than boys. Women who own businesses earn nearly 17% more than men in the same position. As for the paucity of women in high-profile jobs, for many this is a liberating and self-imposed glass ceiling, which marks the decision to leave full-time employment and put their children first. Only recently, Erin Pissy declared feminism was ruining family life, and boy did the boxing gloves come out for that one. Meanwhile, disturbing issues such as female genital mutilation, sexual objectification, and domestic violence have become the responsibility and concern of all society, not simply a rescue project for militant women. And so, bereft of a real cause, today's feminists have become a coven of arguments spoilers who pick petty fights and spew aggressive invective to justify their existence. Not least the Women's Room, who railed against the Bank of England for the lack of women on our banknotes, citing this as evidence of discrimination. Who cares if Jane Austen is emblazoned on a tenner? I don't. I just care that I'm being paid enough of them. Yet this week, when I referred to this pointless campaign on BBC One's Sunday Morning Live, fellow panelist Yasmin Alibi, Yasmin Alibi Brown, I guess, gusted such a patronizing sigh she sounded like a deflated balloon at the end of a raucous party. I don't expect all women to agree with me, but there are many who do. Look no further than the proliferation of a website such as Women Against Feminism. For like many non-feminists, I'm university educated and combine a career with my role of homemaker. At my alma mater, Manchester High School for Girls, no one sought out trite examples of discrimination. We were urged to aim high and fulfill our potential. That, after all, is what the suffragists did. Indeed, the Pankhursts were alumni of the school. Another former pupil was Catherine Meyer, co-founder of the Women's Equality Party, who, unlike others, maintained a grace and courtesy when we discussed our disparate views. A masterclass in how to have a frank exchange of opinions without the need to be bitchy or aggressive. So, ladies, please, have your views and let me have mine. But let's park the unpleasant behavior. Otherwise you simply fuel the stereotype of the indignant screechy harpy. And where's the progress in that?
To be fair, I would have expected this article to be published on something like the Conservative Woman, not so much on the Telegraph, definitely not on the news section. But anyway, maybe the Telegraph is starting to slowly change. Other than that, I can't really disagree with this author. But it does speak volumes about how much most of the feminists respect free speech.
Yeah. Also, one thing I found interesting. Do you happen to know what proportion of banknotes in England have a woman on them?
100% of them. They all have the Queen of
Yes,
England.
exactly the right answer.
And the same is true in Canada. They were at one moment in Canada. They also had this campaign. Yeah, let's put our first woman on the banknotes. And someone went on the media and said, psst, 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 "Hey, please, just a quick note. 100% of our banknotes and coins."
Around.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the whole campaign of let's put a woman on the British pound, on the £10, I think it was the £10 note. They wanted to put Jane Austen there. Yeah, it's who cares?
Yeah, it's.
I think it's a lot more fair to have Charles Darwin in there than Jane Austen. I'm sorry if I'm being biased in here.
Yeah, I mean Jane Austen. I mean, she wrote some novels, I guess, that are somewhat famous and so on, but she doesn't hold a candle to Charles Darwin. I mean, come on, he's like one of the most important scientists in all of history, and
Yes.
I mean, probably like maybe Newton is more significant, but it's like one of the top two scientists in all of England's history, or so.
Yeah, if you have Charles Darwin as your national, you're gonna put that one on the note, or you should, if you're really about preserving some of your national heritage on your currency.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. It's also a nice thing that the author mentions again, mentions Erin Pitti, mentions women against feminism, and more important, it starts with what I would like to see more often. My name is Angela, and I am a non-feminist. No, seriously, this is something that I would like to see, and we will see more and more often in the mainstream media. This thing, individuals starting to define themselves exactly like that. I am not a feminist. Doesn't mean I hate you, but I function, I think, outside of the framework of the feminist ideology.
Yeah, and it's definitely a sign of the changing times that this kind of article is published in the Telegraph. That's definitely a good sign that you wouldn't have seen that 5 years ago, even
Yeah,
2 years
absolutely.
ago.
Even 2 years ago, yes. Yes, and again, it's not buried somewhere in the women's section or whatever, or as Daily Mail does, buries them in the female section, which is written FEMAIL for some reason. No, it's not buried somewhere there. This article was, at least for a few hours, the front page and put in the news and politics section, which goes to show that this particular kind of view has become a bit more important for a publication like the Telegraph.
I guess we're making some progress.
Yes, 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 and there's definitely some real progress on this one. Now, I don't know too much about Catherine Meyer, one of the co-founders of Women's Equality Party in Britain, but that particular party is actually filled with the exact kind of pretentious bitches that this author is criticizing. For more on that, just look on Mike Buchanan's interactions with the Women's Equality Party. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe that particular individual, Catherine Meyer, is a bit more special in the sense that at least can understand how free speech works. But overall, nah, they're not masterclass. But anyway, overall, a very good article. Okay, let's go to the next one. The next one is the next one is depressing. Also from the Telegraph, NSPCC chief, what if convicted babysitter who had sex with 11-year-old had been a man? The head of a leading children's charity has demanded that a babysitter who was spared jail after having sex with an 11-year-old boy is treated seriously, questioning what sentence would have been imposed had she been a man. Jade Had, 21, was looking after the quote-unquote sex-mad child when she stripped off, removed his clothes, then strangled him and had sexual intercourse. She was spared jail after a judge declared that her immaturity narrowed the arithmetic age gap between them. However, Peter Wanless, chief executive of NSPCC, said the incident demonstrates a frightening abuse of trust and has written a letter to the Attorney General's office asking for the case to be brought to the Court of Appeal. He claims the lenience of Had's sentence gives the impression that the sexual abuse of a boy by a woman is less abhorrent than if the victim were a girl and the perpetrator a man. And he says there is a real danger that it will discourage boys from reporting abuse by women. The boy's father, who had a previous sexual relationship with a woman, defended Had in court and described her as immature. He said his son was fully up for the experience. The editors of the Telegraph are on vacation again, and regarded it as a notch on his belt. But Mr. Wanless said the NSPCC regarded the boy's father's statement as disturbing and said it cannot justify the abuse that took place or suggest culpability on the part of the victim. Passing sentence, Judge Tim Mosley QC said it was an exceptional case that allowed him to step outside the rigors of the sentencing guidelines. He told Had, quote, having read everything before me, it was quite clear he was a mature 11-year-old and you were an immature 20-year-old, so that narrows the arithmetic age gap between you. I have read the comments of the boy's father to the police where he doesn't consider you a typical 20-year-old. I have also read what he has said about the effect on the victim. At the time, the NSPCC said the comments beggared belief and sent out completely the wrong message. Now, Mr. Wanless has officially called for the sentence to be referred for review due to being unduly lenient. Leniency was shown to the defendant because of the believed maturity of the victim and immaturity of the defendant, Mr. Wanless said. This cannot be credible. Whilst I understand that sentencing guidelines state a lack of maturity where it affects the responsibility of the offender as a mitigating factor, it is unclear why this was applicable in this case. Furthermore, we are concerned that culpability factors have not been fully considered, such as the frightening abuse of trust involved. The NSPCC shares public concern that the sentence does not reflect the gravity of the offence committed. Swindon Crown Town heard that the incident, which took place last November, lasted around 45 seconds, following which the boy admitted he had not enjoyed it as he knew it was wrong. Police were called after the boy's father noticed a love bite on his neck, and Hat from Sweden was arrested. She told officer the boy had told her he was 15 and pleaded guilty to sexual activity with the child. Rob Ross, defending, said his client was a small, immature woman and the victim was very advanced for his years. In a statement, the boy's father said he is sex mad. He would have been fully up for this experience and in many ways sees it as a notch on his belt and is totally unaffected by it. Mr. Ross said Hat clearly doesn't operate at the level of a 20-year-old and was honest with the police about what had taken place. He said he was vulnerable and had a hard upbringing. Judge Mosley imposed a 6-month jail term, suspended for 2 years with supervision, and ordered Had to register as a sex offender for 7 years. She was also banned from having unsupervised contact with young boys for 2 years, but Mr. Wanless said that culpability factors were not fully considered. The NSPCC shares public concern that the sentence does not reflect the gravity. The implication that the underage victim was somehow responsible for the abuse he experienced is particularly concerning, and we would question whether the sentencing would have been the same were the victim a female and the perpetrator a male. We believe that sentences should never give the impression that sexual abuse of a boy by a woman is less abhorrent than if the victim were a girl and the perpetrator a man. And there is real danger that the lightweight sentence in this case will discourage boys from reporting abuse by women in the belief that it will not be treated seriously, and that women with a sexual interest in young boys may think that the criminal justice system will take a more lenient view of any offense they commit. Well, actually, the criminal justice system does take a more lenient view of any offense women do commit. This is actually
I don't
fact.
see how that is debatable.
Yeah, it's not debatable. It's true.
Yeah. Also, let me just say, fuck that father. I mean, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's no secret that as opposed to most Anglophones, I believe that the age of consent laws in the Anglosphere are completely irrational, and I prefer more of a Hungarian or Swiss model of approaching teenagers having sex. But 11, no, that's completely insane.
Yeah, not even if it's a very mature 11-year-old or whatever.
No, that's still insane. No. I can't agree on that low. I mean, yeah, 13, 14, sure, why not? I could definitely believe that line of reasoning, but 11, get the fuck out of here. No, that's insane.
Yeah, and I mean, it narrows the age gap and so on, but that the age gap is still 9 years, and that's quite a lot at this age. 11-year-old and a 20-year-old, that's a 20-year-old is an adult, and an 11-year-old is still a child, and yeah.
And also, if it narrows the gap because it's immature, because she's immature and whatnot, then by that same standard, the father should have been sent to jail for having sex with underage, because
that's actually a good point.
I mean, let's apply that logic consistently. I mean, what kind of argument is that? I mean, I'm trying to understand the line of reasoning that the judge had in his mind, and I'm unable to find it.
I mean, it is reasonable to have, some sort of room for the judge's discretion, but if your age of consent is 16, as I believe it is in Britain, and the boy is 11, then that's just no. I mean, that's just so far off that how can you possibly let get away with that and still somehow preserve faith in the rule of law? I mean, it's just.
Yeah, I mean, again, as I said, if the case were, I don't know, 14 and a half or something like that, I would definitely be a lot more sympathetic because I believe age of consent should be 14 or something. But uh, but 11, and this, I mean, that individual is a pedo. Come on, let's say it.
Uh,
Because no, no.
I don't
And
know.
I'm not buying this. That, oh, but he told me he's 15. No, you're the babysitter. You know the age. Uh, Besides, there is quite a big difference between how an 11-year-old boy looks and how a 15-year-old boy looks.
Yeah, also, even if he was 15, it would still be illegal. So I'm.
Yeah, but then again, if it had been 15, it would be a completely different moral argument.
Yeah, I agree with that, but it would still have been so. Even if she believed it was 15, she still, knowingly committed a crime.
Yeah, but to be fair, Britain has started to apply these kinds of leniencies when it comes to 15, 16 thing. Male teachers were also spared jail when they had sex with a 15 and something, and things like that. So, in that regard, the judge would have been quite a lot within the margins of laws and precedents in Britain to hand down such an opinion.
Okay, fair enough, but 11 is not 15.
Yeah, yeah, true, true, true. And I'm not buying the perpetrator's argument. Yeah, but I thought he's 15. No bullshit. I'm not buying that. Uh, and and the thing is that yes, indeed, sexual assault on boys by women is indeed taken very kindly. I mean, look, nowhere in this article do we find uh, the keyword. You know what the keyword is, right?
The R word.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's the R word. It's, oh, he had sex with the 11-year-old boy. No, we call that rape. And it's then described that it lasted whatever time, a minute or 45 seconds, and then said he didn't enjoy it and whatnot. And we call that rape in civilized society. But as apparently we don't call that when the victim is an 11-year-old boy. The thing is that
But
this is not.
is it actually rape according to British definitions? I'm not sure.
No, actually, no. You're right. Yeah, you're right. The punishments are identical, but when the woman is perpetrator, it's not called rape in the law. Yeah, you're right. We had this conversation with Mike Buchanan when we had him on the show, and he explained to us that whilst the punishments are identical, there is a separate crime called sexual assault and that one applies when the woman is a perpetrator and the victim is male.
Yeah. So I guess
Crazy.
at least officially they're correct not to call it a rape.
Hmm. Yes, yes. Uh, Also, this is not, and this is why I included this small article from Sweden. This is not a British disease. I mean, except for the countries whose language I don't speak, I have yet to see a European country where female sex criminals aren't treated at least slightly more lenient. For instance, in my country, female sex criminals are treated quite harsh, but they're still treated slightly more lenient. Because, I don't know, because we still don't think women can do that. For instance, this article in Sweden from Sydsvenskan, sentenced for sexual abuse that happened 14 years ago. A woman in Södermanland was convicted for a sexual abuse that she committed 14 years ago, according to P4 Sörmland. The woman, who today is in her 30s, had sex with a 13-year-old boy on a number of occasions. She also became pregnant and gave birth to a child. The assaults were reported last year by the now grown man. The woman has admitted that she had sex with the boy, and the paternity test proves that he is the father of the child. Nyköping District Court found her guilty of sexual exploitation of a minor, and she was sentenced to probation. Again, in the feminist capital of Europe, at least, maybe not of the world, there is a lot of competition from Canada and India, but at least in the feminist capital of Europe, I sincerely doubt that a man in his early 20s would have left pregnant a 13-year-old girl would be sentenced to probation. I don't think so, unless unless the man was an immigrant. There was recently a case in Sweden where an immigrant was actually spared jail because poor background or something like that. Insane. And on the other hand, we should regard it a little bit more positive. I mean, hey, we're not in the United States. In the United States, this man would have been even asked to pay child support.
Yeah, I was
Once,
just thinking that.
yeah, once he reached 18, he would have been liable for child support, and if he did not pay it, he could go to jail for not paying child support to his rapist. This is common occurrence in the United States. Not so common in Europe, actually in Sweden, not at all. So, I mean, it's bad, but it could be worse.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so we're now slowly reaching to our last article. Yeah, we're just in time. Amazing how efficient we've been. We're going to our last article, which pretty much concludes the title of this show: Violence by Women and Free Speech. Coming from The Guardian, you chose the shortest version of this news, haven't you? London woman charged after alleged #KillAllWhiteMen tweet. Yes, because it's alleged. It's not like the whole fucking planet has seen it. It's alleged. Jesus Christ.
Maybe someone hacked her account.
Yeah, sure, of course, and because yeah, right. And then she felt the need to defend the hacking by openly expressing in words live on on other channels that she tweeted it and doesn't believe it's racist. Yeah.
Maybe those channels were also hacked.
Yeah, everything was hacked. Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, the article says a student in diversity officer, I can't say this with a straight face, who came to prominence in a race row after allegedly tweeting the #KillAllWhiteMen, has been charged by police with sending a threatening communication. Bahar Mustafa of Goldsmith, University of London, is set to appear at Bromley Magistrates Court on November 5. The 28-year-old from Edmonton, northeast London, faces 2 charges. One is sending a communication conveying a threatening message between November 10, 2014 and May 31, 2015. The second is for sending a grossly offensive message via a public communication network between November 10, 2014 and May 31, 2015. Mustafa was initially accused of racism for asking white men not to attend a students' union meeting intended for ethnic minority women and non-binary attendees. She then became embroiled in a separate row, accused of using the #KillAllWhiteMan on her Twitter account, which has since been deleted. A Metropolitan Police spokesman said in a statement, quote, "A woman interviewed under a caution regarding a complaint of racially motivated malicious communication made on social media network has been summoned to court."
That's actually correct.
Yeah, okay. Mustafa is neither an employee of Goldsmiths nor a student, but an employee of the Independent Students' Union elected by union members. Mustafa remained in her position as Welfare and Diversity Officer after a petition for a motion of no confidence fell short of the 3% of union members required to trigger a poll. After the furor, Mustafa denied that her initial request for white men to stay away from a union meeting was racist or sexist, and said she had received rape and death threats. And, you know, in the PS, The Guardian apologizes for writing non-binary women at first, and of course they meant non-binary attendees. It's not like the 100% of those are bigoted, upper middle class, left wing, privileged white women or something. No. It's non-binary attendees, of course.
Non-binary entities.
Yeah, attendees, not entities. Although entities would be more appropriate.
Yeah, because we don't want to be a speciesist here.
Speciesists, yes, absolutely. Jesus Christ. I mean, what? On the other hand, I don't know. I have an urge to go on record with the "I stand with Bahar Mustafa" thing. I mean, I don't think she should be prosecuted. Yes, she's an absolute cunt, but I don't think she should be prosecuted.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Though there were like 2 tweets that were not mentioned in this article, which I'm going to post into the chat. Here's the one, and here's the other. So the first one, she retweeted a tweet by Anarchist Federation, which said Tories should be afraid to walk the streets. And the second
Mm-hmm.
one, she wrote, any violence that happens to Tories at an anti-Tory demo ain't violence, it's self-defense. So that sort of could plausibly be interpreted as some kind of threat, though I don't
No.
know.
No, I disagree. I mean, I disagree with her views entirely. I mean, I probably, if Bahar Mustafa tells me that the grass is green, I would still check and double check before agreeing with her. So, yeah, but on the other hand, uh, I don't think it's threatening. I mean, any violence that happens to Tories at an anti-Tory demo ain't violence, it's self-defense. I think it goes with the implication that if Tories do show up at their own private demo, they could interpret it as an assault, and as such, they are in self-defense. Now, of course, this line of thinking is dubious to say the least, but to prosecute her for this tweet, nah, nah.
Yeah,
I'm not convinced.
I do
I
agree.
don't think that Tories are shaking their pants when reading this.
Yeah, definitely. Um, the thing is that when it comes to free speech, you do have to sort of draw a line at threats. Like, for example, if I don't know, so some big tough guy walks up to you, or cracks his knuckles, and sort of looks threateningly at you and says, um, "Give me your wallet," and you
Hmm.
give it to him, then that's not just him, exercising free speech and convincing you
So,
to make a gift of your wallet to him. No,
hmm.
he's threatening you, and
Yes.
he's extorted your money under that threat, and that's a crime, and should
Hmm.
properly be prosecuted as such. Um,
Hmm.
so you have to make a distinction for threats. Question is then, what is something a threat? And in this case, I think while you could plausibly make some sort of argument for it, I think it's rather weak, and I do think we should interpret free speech as widely as we reasonably can. And in this case, I think it's clearly, or there's I think a lot of doubt whether this could be interpreted as by a reasonable person as a threat. So I don't think it's appropriate to involve the law here.
Yeah, and I think I mean, and if we are to actually um, interpret something as threat, maybe this one, the original tweet of the Anarchist Federation, which, mind you, it's not really a small organization, and they're known for violence in the past, and they have thugs amongst their ranks. Them saying Tories should be afraid to walk the streets, uh, I would interpret that as a threat. Uh, a lot more than what Bahar Mustafa said here. I mean, Bahar Mustafa is at the end of the day one individual, and I don't see her capable of walking up to three Tories and started beating the crap out of them. She's afraid of words on Twitter, for crying out loud. Or at least she claims she is.
Yeah, also, he's a full-time troublemaker, revolutionary feminist queen, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I wouldn't know better, and if I hadn't seen the video clips with her, I would still be doubting whether Bahar Mustafa actually exists. And I'm not joking, I mean, she's a caricature. She's the welfare and diversity officer tweeting "kill all white men" at a university that has, it's called Goldsmith. I'm surprised it's not called Goldstein. And is sometimes antisocial, antisocialist, sometimes antisocial, always anti-fascist, and revolutionary feminist queen. I mean, come on. 9 out of 10 cases, you would assume this is a caricature. It's not something that actually exists in reality.
Have you been to Tumblr?
Yes, I have been to Tumblr, and I've actually taken some time to dig up on some of the most obnoxious Tumblrites, and noticed that a significant portion of them are not even trolls, are caricature.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, obviously some of those some of those Tumblrs that post a lot of idiotic shit, some of them are for real, but a significant portion of them are not. And also, let's not forget that Tumblr is a very big network. Those messed up things that we keep on seeing everywhere, they don't represent not even 30% of the entire network, probably even less than that. So, it's not
Yeah.
really a safe space for insanity. Most of Tumblr is about pictures with kittens and photoshopped pictures and artists posting whatever they found out recently and things like that. And there's even conservative blogs on Tumblr about facts about gun violence and things like that. I mean, for instance, I go on Tumblr because there is a Tumblr called Nazis and Kittens, and they're World War II pictures with Nazis petting kittens. I'm not joking. And there's also a Tumblr called the Islamic State and Kittens. Then there's jihadis petting kittens. So yeah, Tumblr is a little bit more complex than nasty feminists posting batshit crazy stuff. But yeah, coming back to Bahar Mustafa, uh, considering my experience with trolls online and whatnot, and I have a lot of experience, in 20 years of this year, I'm making 20 years since I joined the internet. Uh, in 20 years, you see a lot of fucked up shit, a lot of it. Uh, in maybe not 9 out of 10, but definitely 7 out of 10 cases, I would think that Bahar Mustafa doesn't exist. If all I would see were these screen caps. Is she a messed up cunt? Yes. Is she a criminal? Nope.
Yeah, I definitely think she deserves to lose her job as a diversity officer, whatever that is, for this
Whatever
sort
that
of
is.
stuff.
Job.
But a job in inverted commas. But yeah, she should not be prosecuted by the law for this.
Yeah, and even with the job, I mean, according to this Guardian piece, she's there in an elected position, and the employer is the student union, which, at least in theory, is independent from the university. So I guess it depends. And people tried to make her lose her job, but they didn't even gather 3% of the union members to even agree to a re-election or a
Yeah,
referendum, whatever.
what I mean is that the student union should hold this referendum and kick her out.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's probably a good thing to do. But again, if they don't do this, uh, I think it falls within the boundaries of free speech for the rest of us to keep on shaming them for keeping her
Yes,
around.
definitely.
Yeah, and Britain has some very weird to say the least. I would rather go to say messed up laws regarding so-called hate speech and whatnot. Uh, a guy went to jail for calling a policeman's horse gay. Admittedly, this happened in 2005, so 10 years ago, but still. So, by that standard, Mrs. Mustafa should have been in jail a long time ago. But by my standard, you'd have to work quite hard. Your example with the threat, that's the kind of example where I would agree with the prosecution. But in most cases, I mean, people should be able to tweet and say whatever the fuck they please, no matter how offensive and messed up it is.
Yeah, I mean, not quite whatever they want. You can make credible threats through Twitter. This is not one of them, but you can do that, and that should be prosecuted, I think. But not these sort of general statements. Tories should be afraid to walk the streets. I mean, writing that sort of stuff makes you an asshole, but I don't think it makes you a criminal.
Yeah, good to be fair, I'll have to think quite a lot of a situation where there is such thing as a credible threat over Twitter. I mean, I guess if I tweet my neighbor and say I'll come into your house by force and beat the crap out of you in 10 minutes, I guess that's a credible threat because I could legitimately do it even if I don't do it. It's a credible threat. But if I tweet to Miss Mustafa that I would like to see you sucking a bag of dicks, is that a threat? I don't
Yeah,
know.
no.
I can't
That's
really force her to do it. I mean, it's not like she's not a few, 1,000, 2,000 kilometers away from me.
yeah, but say you live in the same city and you tell her, I know you live there and there. I'm going to come and kill you unless you do such and such. Then I would
Yeah,
say that this
yes.
is
Yeah,
a
that
threat.
is. But then again, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that there's always surrounding factors that should be considered, not just the
Yeah.
threat. It's because if I threaten Bahar, I think is right her name. Yeah,
Yes.
Bahar. If I threaten Bahar Mustafa with anything, it should not be considered a threat to begin with. I can't make her do anything. Realistically speaking, no matter how much I want it. Now, of course, unless I take the plane and try to find her, which is
Well, I
a
know
lot
you hire a
further.
hitman or something like that.
Yeah, but then again, in order to hire a hitman, again, you have to demonstrate that I have connections to do that and the resources to do that. Contrary to the popular opinion, hitmen aren't cheap. But it's always corroborating circumstances in order to declare something as not free speech, but rather threats and credible threats and whatnot. And it's very interesting that most of the people who uh, that I've seen going full in the sense of I stand with her and whatnot are usually people who disagree with her. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I've seen some progressive here and there, but I've been following for a few days the hashtag I stand with Bahar Mustafa, and most of the tweets were for people who fundamentally disagree with her.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. The same is interesting with the little feud that is at the Manchester University, if I recall correctly, where a debate was supposed to take place between
Yeah.
Julie Bindel and Milo Yiannopoulos. And then again, most of the people calling for Julie Bindel to be welcomed again and whatnot were staunch anti-feminists or conservatives or people who regard her as idiot. I regard her as human garbage, but I still think she should be allowed to spew her nonsense and be engaged in a debate with Milo or with anyone else.
Yeah.
And I really do regard Julie Bindel as human garbage. I mean, I'm standing by that statement. But then again, that doesn't mean she should be censored. Because if she's censored, we don't get to read her nonsense, and if we don't get to read her nonsense, we don't know how insane is she getting.
Yeah. Though to be fair, um, it's not like she's forbidden from speaking. She's just not allowed to appear at this particular university. So it's not quite the same as, the government saying you're not allowed to say this or you go to jail.
Yes, but that university is still taxpayer funded, and because it's taxpayer funded, there is at least an implied moral obligation that once you invite someone, you at least maintain that invitation. Because it wasn't she who said, "Yeah, well, I want to speak at Manchester University." No, no, no. She was first invited, and like, "Hey, Julie, want to debate a gay conservative from Breitbart?" And said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And then 2 days later, "Oh, our sensitive special snowflakes from the student union said that you have been no platformed because potato."
Yeah, I
uh, that kind of thing is still the kind of slippery slope that I can't really tolerate, especially given
maybe
that it's a university funded by the taxpayers. Yeah, let all the radicals speak. Why not? If we
maybe we
if
should
we're Go ahead.
maybe we should make an argument that this that uninviting those two speakers is an example of homophobia because they're uninviting a gay man and a lesbian woman. That's obviously they just must hate gays.
Yeah, maybe I should tweet that to Julie Bindel and Milo.
And obviously that has to be the only reason, right?
Yeah, there can't be any other reason. No, actually, I don't know why they eventually canceled the invitation for Milo as well. They first only canceled Julie Bindel, and we know why she was canceled, because she's a trans exclusionary radical feminist. That's why. But Milo, they haven't yet decided on why. And of course, at first, Julie Bindel was like, "Yeah, well, it's obvious misogyny, because Nero is still allowed in there, and I'm not, because of my views about trannies. And it's that kind of clusterfuck, and it's very interesting for me to see that the people speaking in favor of allowing these lunatics to speak are exactly people who disagree with them.
Yeah, though I guess in the case of Bahar Mustafa, I think um, most of the feminists, I guess, are just silent because they don't want to be associated with her because it's such a train wreck, and even they don't really want to be, for the most part, associated with kill all white men and stuff like that. It just gives them a bad name.
Yeah.
Whereas for anti-feminists, this is uh, this is exactly the kind of thing that makes us look good, because we can see look, we are so much more virtuous than the feminists. We support this opponent, but this opponent actually makes our opponents look really bad. So
Yeah, and it's also it's also the kind of golden opportunity for non-feminists to say, look, we first and foremost act upon principles, uh, less than because it is a principled position at the end of the day. It's not like
yes.
uh, I mean, for instance, Julie Bindel, it doesn't really make feminists look that bad. I mean, come on, she's a Guardian columnist and whatnot. And, she's actually a very reputable feminist. So, she doesn't really make our opponents look really that bad. Yet there's still staunch anti-feminists saying, "Yeah, sure, let her speak." With Bahar Mustafa, I don't know. I mean, in the past, feminists have taken the bait of the hashtag "kill all men."
Yeah, some of them have, of course.
Some of them have, yeah. It's hard to measure how many, but what proportions? Sorry, how many is very easy to count, but what proportion of them? Yeah, it's a bit more complicated. But I don't know. I mean, is it really? Do we are we really witnessing? And this is a serious question, and probably the last one. Are we really witnessing a rise of what some called cultural libertarianism? Although I hate that term for various reasons. Probably I'll explain some other time why. Are we really witnessing a rise of such thing? Because there's quite a much higher number of people than in the past saying, yeah, let the loons speak. So what if we disagree? We'll present our own counter arguments in an open market. That was
Uh,
far less. That was far less present 3 years ago. I mean, 3 years ago when it was just somewhere in the corner of the newspaper. Oh yeah, and that speaker was no platformed, and that's it.
I'm not so sure. I think that as happens so often, the things are moving in several directions simultaneously.
Hmm.
That on the one hand, we do have this surge of people speaking up for freedom of speech. Um, but on the other hand, we still have a lot of this anti-hate speech stuff, and I think that that is still a very strong sentiment among a lot of people, and perhaps even still gaining steam. So I don't know what the eventual end result will be or where it will move. So I think it's very difficult to predict these kinds of things.
Yeah, no, I'm not trying to predict. What I'm trying to assess is whether the so-called rise of cultural libertarianism is a real thing or is not, or it's rather just a misinterpretation of the events.
Yeah, I think it is a real thing. I think it is fueled a lot by the internet, by the fact that it's just no longer nearly as easy to just shut up minority voices.
Hmm.
Um, and censorship in an age of television where you have a couple of stations, that's pretty easy.
Hmm.
Newspaper, there's also not that many, and I mean, some of these smaller local newspapers, maybe they're not so easy to censor because there's a lot of them, but they don't have a very wide circulation. Whereas the internet, it's basically almost impossible to effectively censor that, and things just will get out, and you will find, people have the opportunity of forming communities of like-minded people, even if you're a small minority, which
Mhm.
just didn't happen before. And for these reasons, I think free speech, this sort of movement, is on the rise.
Mhm.
Uh, though how much influence it's going to have in the end is difficult to say.
Yeah, and there's also the aspect that some societies are a lot more affected than others because when something minuscule happens at a small college or university in Britain, there's 3 billion English speakers who find out about it thanks to the internet. And you don't know how much of the negative reaction comes from your community or from Australia or New Zealand. Whilst the same is not necessarily true with other societies, such as, let's say, the Dutch society. How many people speak Dutch? Well, I don't know, maybe 30 million, maybe 35 million. Most of them live in the Netherlands. Uh, it's it's less likely that you'll be assaulted by negative reactions from overseas, essentially.
Yeah, that's definitely sort of the sort of special position that English has, is that it's spoken
Hmm.
um, sort of all over the world, more or less.
Spanish
And
has the same position, yeah, and in Spanish circles it happens the same thing. That's why, for instance, Maduro from Venezuela doesn't really like the internet because you get Spanish speakers from all over the world digging up facts and translating stuff and whatnot and bringing them there, regardless of the will of the Caracas regime. But this is the kind of position that only a handful of languages have.
yeah, definitely, there's a lot of languages that are sort of basically just spoken in a single country, and
Mhm.
then you can have control a lot more easily.
Mhm.
I could take a language like, say, Icelandic. It's a language that's spoken by a couple of 100,000 people, most of
Mhm.
them living in Iceland, and
Mhm.
something happens in Icelandic that's usually not going very far. And
Mhm.
whereas in English, it's spoken in many different countries. Language like German, for example, it's mostly spoken in Germany, but also in Austria and in Switzerland. And there's a couple of other places where German speakers are maybe not in the majority, but a significant minority.
Mhm.
And so there's a little bit of that going out. Or French, it's even more
Mhm.
spoken in a number of countries around the world. Um, so that definitely affects things of how easy it is to get the word out.
Mhm. On the other hand, there is the reverse argument, namely that, for instance, Swedish. Swedish is a very closed language. I mean, it's spoken in Sweden and Finland, and that's it. Uh, and as a result, the Swedish government tried to regulate as much as possible, and their laws are essentially what's written in Swedish is subject to our regulatory authority. Yet there is a problem. There is such thing called the forum flashback.us, obviously located in the United States, entirely in Swedish, and it's all about whatever it's forbidden in Sweden, and it's written on that forum. And whilst the Swedish government has tried really, really hard to regulate Flashback out of existence, it has worked. Oh, wait, it didn't work. So I guess there is hope even for smaller language groups.
Yeah, and there's this thing called the Streisand effect, that when you try to censor something, then often it just gets repeated over and over again, and just the news that you're trying to censor it, or just that fact makes it news and makes it interesting, and
Hmm.
lots of people see it. Those, of course,
Hmm.
are difficult to say how often that kind of thing fails, because if something is successfully censored, then sort of by definition you don't hear about it.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, all it takes is for the censorship to fail once or twice so it can become news, and then any further attempts are bound to fail because there will be the news that they're trying to censor.
Yeah, and people are very sensitive about that these days.
Yeah, that and I guess that proves the success uh, of the so-called cultural libertarian uh, philosophy. I don't like this terminology at all, but for lack of a better terminology, if people are more sensitive about censorship than in the past, then I guess that's a win.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not even sure if they're more sensitive. I think it's just the people hear about it more, and it gets out easy because of the internet.
Hmm. Hmm. I don't know. In my little circles, people are definitely more sensitive about it than 20 years ago. But then again, there's special circumstances. We kind of know what censorship is, and we don't like it. Whilst some other countries haven't been through a censorship regime in quite a while. I mean, when was the last time the government actively tried to censor speech in Britain? In the 40s during the war.
Yeah, probably pretty much that was probably the last time when they did it in sort of a major way.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's been a while. For most of the people who are alive today were not alive at the time. Uh, didn't exist in that sense. So it's a lot further in the collective memory, and maybe they need a little bit of a boost because and this I may be wrong, but I've seen that the Brits are a lot more um, how should I put it? A lot more happy to accept some small losses of freedom of expression for the sake of protecting, for the sake of avoiding committing offense and things like that, as opposed to Americans who are a lot more like, no, this is my God-given right, fuck you all.
Yeah, definitely. It's a lot stronger the sentiment in America. Um,
Hmm.
Also, for example, in Canada also has similar, perhaps even harsher hate speech laws and such.
Oh, in
Uh,
Canada, there's also the policy aspect of it. I mean, besides the laws themselves, which are not really that different from the UK, but the policies, the way they're enforced, they allow the student unions to shut down events. They have those kangaroo human rights courts, which can quite literally write laws by themselves because potato. The enforcement of them is bizarre and in many cases Kafkaesque. I mean, I've been reading from Mark Stein's book about freedom of expression, and I'm shocked about what I'm reading about Canada in his book.
yeah, that's definitely something that I really like about American society, that they really take free speech very seriously. I mean, there were periods in its history where that wasn't the case, where people were, going to jail and
Hmm.
being investigated and so on for having bad opinions, like during the Civil War, during both World Wars, and
Hmm.
with McCarthyism and so on. But at least in the last couple of decades, that is really very much taken seriously.
Hmm. Hmm. Maybe we in Europe should learn a thing or two about that. We really do need, especially if we could drill it by force into the heads of the messed up people from the European Parliament. That would be fantastic.
Oh,
Maybe.
I guess that was a threat, so.
Oh yeah, that was a threat. Yeah. Yeah, maybe in that fashion, we would have fewer European national frameworks for promotion of tolerance. If you remember that stupidity, I don't know if you do. It's that one where it says that 14-year-old pupils could be sent to re-education camps for being anti-feminists.
Yeah, there's all sort of blend together in my mind at some point, all these UN reports. There's
No, that was from the EU. It was the
also
Europe.
EU, UN, that's all the same,
Yeah, it's all the same. To be
more or
fair, it
less.
kind of is. I mean, at least in the EU, we don't have the Saudi Arabia chairing the Human Rights Council. But other than that, yeah, they are kind of the same. Even the name of the bureaucrats kind of sound the same.
Yeah. And also,
Okay, go ahead.
what never should be forgotten is that in Belgium, this show is arguably illegal. So that's what would you have to stress again and again. So,
Sorry, please repeat the last sentence. I didn't hear you. You
oh,
said that
that
something
that
arguably illegal,
this
but I
show
didn't.
is arguably illegal in Belgium, and
Oh yes, 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 absolutely. I
So,
forgot about that.
so
Yes,
if you're
our
currently
show.
listening to us in Belgium, then you better be careful.
Hey, you should go report us to the police because if I remember correctly, the law doesn't say that the listener is at fault. It's the
Oh, okay,
utterer.
okay.
So, but it's
So,
still a subversive act to listen to it and without reporting it. So I don't know what laws Belgium has regarding mandatory reporting. I know that some countries do punish individuals who fail to report criminal activity.
I guess that would be pretty good publicity if the Belgian government tried to prosecute us.
Yeah, I would love to be prosecuted in absentia by a Belgian tribunal. That would be fabulous. I would laugh a lot and would ask for the copyright of the Belgian government to allow me to live broadcast my trial on my channel with the title "Watch How I'm Being Prosecuted by the District Attorney." Yeah, that would be fun, and it would be a fabulous publicity. And then watch our audience how it soars. Yeah, maybe I should write a letter to the Belgium attorney general and consider it.
Maybe you should turn yourself in.
Yeah, I should virtually turn myself in. Yeah, I'm gonna write an official letter with my signature and mail it. Because in Belgium, which is a much more bureaucratic country, I don't think they even take electronic signature yet. So you have to physically mail it.
Yeah, the joys of bureaucracy.
Yep, 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 yep. You can't even turn yourself in without suffering a bit of bureaucracy. Uh, all right, I think we kind of exhausted everything that needed to be said about this. We've talked about violence by women against anyone, and we've talked about free speech. I think that's pretty much it.
Yep, I think we've rambled long enough.
Yep, yep.
So the only
So
thing that remains to be said is take the red pill.
take the red pill. Goodbye, everyone. James, please take us out.